Sal Franco. We are live on our first podcast. This could be a good trial, but also hopefully get some information out of this whole thing. Can you the whole purpose of this of us getting together today? The main cause we wanted to find out how does somebody who wants to remodel their bathroom or their kitchen or any part of the house or maybe new construction, I don't know. You can tell us how the client should approach their dream job or something that they want to create beautiful in their home. Where should they start? First of all, where should they start?
It's been interesting, right, to meet all these different clients throughout the years, 20 plus years of doing this. And it seems like every client has not two clients have had the same vision. Everybody approaches everything different. A lot of clients are very organized, but don't have a design. Then you have clients that have great design, but are not organized with it. So There's that paper client that has everything written down from, the wants, the needs, the wish list. Then you have the client that just has no idea of what they want and how they want it. Knowing how to speak to each individual client, it's important. Not just from the perspective of like the design, but being able to understand their vision.
Right.
Because at the end of the day.
But do you think they have vision? Like a realistic vision or calculated vision? Or do you think they just like what they like and they just, make it happen for me, but really they didn't calculate costs, they didn't calculate time frames, none of that. So that, I guess, is your job.
Yeah, and you'll have all of that. You'll have the client that is very goal, very budget oriented, which I like. They know how much they can spend. So then I can tell them this vision does not fit this budget. Right. And you have, the flip side of that coin where they don't have a budget, but they have a huge vision until you break down that vision and tell them what the cost is of something like that they realize, well, my vision is not what I can afford to do.
What would be your recommendation as an expert in this field? You'd say, you know what? I wish clients did this before. Or do you think that they should actually have all these, in order to get all these things in line, they need to get the designer, get this, get that, all these things in place first and try to see if they can come up with a great plan?
I think when it comes to certain clients, it's very important for them to at least have a vision, right? Not so much their finished vision of what they expect things to look like, but just have an idea of what they want. Fortunately for me, with clients, I've been able to help them, guide them in the direction. I don't ever really go into a project as a salesperson. I go into a project as how can I make this client's vision and dream come true? Because most of your remodels, your kitchen remodels, your bathroom remodels, your full remodels, it's something that you're going to spend a decent amount of money, right? So you can do all the planning and all the vision and all the plans and deal with the designer and do this and do that. But if they don't come into a project with the mindset of how can I make their vision come true and how can I do it in a affordable way? That is a really important thing, right? That's why I always tell my clients to have their 3 lists. It's always three lists that they need to do. Their needs, their wants, and their wishes. And how can I make those 3 items, those 3 lists come together? So
what does that mean? Can you break it down? The need is
something that is just, you need a pantry. If you have 4 kids in your household and you have large amount of food in a pantry, you need a pantry. That's a need for them,
I see.
And different clients have different needs. Clients may just want the nice
thing that we're in a society that's just spoiled and they don't really need a pantry or an extra anything, and they just want to make it nicer and nicer because this social media is pushing it out there.
100%. There's a lot
It's
of
not a
that.
need, it's a want.
And that's that is, perhaps for some people it is a want. For other people it is a need, right? Because
really?
a lot of people look at it like, well, I need that because I don't want to have appliances, this and that on top of my countertops because I have small kids. They're going to be pulling on cords. I don't want to have
see.
blenders.
I
I don't.
see. Right.
So it just depends on where they're at family wise, right?
Right.
If you have a single guy that's remodeling a kitchen, he wants to make that look slick and clean, almost as if nobody ever cooks in that thing, which probably nobody ever cooks on it, but it's for the looks, right? And the appeal of what your house looks like. So knowing that client, it's very important to understand what their needs are. And some of them don't understand what their needs are. And they do go with the mentality of, I saw this on Pinterest, or I saw this on House, or, my friend has this cool kitchen, but perhaps her friend doesn't cook 3 meals a day. Perhaps her friend just has a pretty kitchen.
Right.
So it starts to become a relationship with the customer, right? Because that is the only way to understand what they really need and what you could provide for them. Because if you don't get to know somebody in a certain level of they're allowing you in their home, they're trusting in you in their home, right? They're trusting you with perhaps their livelihood, because some people do spend their livelihoods in their home in a remodel. So how do you take that into consideration?
What are the issues that you think a client should be aware of that happen in the industry? For example, they're hiring a plumber, they're hiring a contractor, they're hiring a salesperson who is kind of like a broker, middleman, whatever. There's all these different, variations of how you can approach your project.
Right.
So is there a right or a wrong? Is there like, here's an ideal scenario, but there are some people that are, they're coming to a contractor and they're saying, I want to be hands-on.
Right.
Or I completely don't want to think about anything. I want it to be done in the next whatever, right? Like
one of the things that I've noticed a lot throughout the years is when I come in and look at a project, and I come in, I give my ideas, I give rough numbers of where they can possibly be on a budget, and then I don't hear from them for months. And then I get a phone call that says, hey, I hired a guy that came in and gave me a really great price. And the great price ended up being a nightmare price because it was the lowest price they can get. And they thought that their vision was going to come true. And they just hired the wrong person. And a lot of it, I would say, more than 50% of the time of callbacks that I get from potential clients that I did not try to sell on has come back for the reason that they hired somebody else that convinced them that, yes, I can get this done for this amount of money, and it ends up being that it cannot be done. So being aware of costs is very important. Doing your homework when it comes to hiring.
How do you do that transparency, right? That's the notice. What I noticed is there's still a big lack of transparency in this industry. Like you go to a restaurant, they have open kitchens. They got it. They're like, okay, this works. So we're going to create this concept. But for some reason, the construction industry is still not that. It's not that. There is no honestly, the cost is this. This is what this costs. This is what my labor costs. So why don't you break it down, break it simple for me?
Yeah.
Right?
So this is my approach with it. Okay.
No, but tell me the truth. Is there a scheme going on in there? Is there a lot of scheming going on?
There is a lot of scheming going on. There is a lot of guys that will give you an estimate, and it's not an itemized estimate, right? And at the end of the day, I feel like that's what causes problems between clients and contractors, because the contractor's not being, perhaps he's not being very thorough with what the scope of work is, right? 2, he feels like he can sneak in a certain amount of work, but then when something comes up, right, then they're trying to charge the customer additional cost.
Right.
On my end, the way that I avoid that is I do not like the change order conversation. That is not something that I like to have. It's not a comfortable conversation for me to have with my client.
But isn't that inevitable?
Well, it depends.
Have you ever had one that did not have a change order?
Yes, I have.
Did.
I have. And I'll tell you why the difference between a change order, what I consider a change order, right? What I would consider a change order is when I took the time to itemize every single thing that I'm doing at your property. I've taken the time to sit down with you and go through the itemized list of what we're doing.
Mhm.
So you are clearly and you understand it.
Right.
A change order to me is something that is above that scope of work that you and I have discussed. That to
Right.
me is a change order. You decided that you wanted a different light fixture. There's allowances. There's a lot of things to a detailed itemized estimate, which it takes time to do.
But the problem is you're dealing with a person. So, okay, if you were dealing with an interior designer, even then there might be change orders. I'll tell you why. Because I think that a, a designer knows more than a client that is just likes a better bathroom or kitchen. Now, a designer understands, a little plumbing, a little this, a little that. They understand how things work. So they kind of can calculate what would look good or what cost would be, all that kind of stuff. I don't think a client knows any of that stuff.
Correct.
They don't understand, they can't envision it. Not the final product, not the middle product. It's difficult.
And to that is you run into the clients could do all the research they want when it comes to materials and labor and things like that. But there's stuff that they don't know about, right?
Right.
The time that it takes to pick up materials, the time that it takes to do the research for those materials.
Yes.
And to what I was saying is, the change order, yes, change orders do happen. But if I gave you an itemized estimate, right, I am including everything based on my experience of construction that I know that I'm going to need here. So if I come back to you and say, hey, Ellie, by the way, I didn't account that you were going to need an upgrade on your panel, right? Because I'm remodeling your kitchen. Well, that's not the change order conversation that I want to have. I'm going to charge an additional $15,000 for this electrical panel. Why?
Right.
When you could have done the research prior to, right?
Right.
And you put it in there. And that's an option. Look, this might potentially be something that could happen if you go with this appliance, if you go add this extra lighting, or if you do whatever. Those are the experiences that a contractor should have when he's writing an estimate.
Would you say it's wise to hire somebody, a contractor maybe such as yourself, that will do all that research and set up the plans properly? And whoever they hire to do the actual job could be different. Is that something that's...
It's something that does happen. You do have people that you have clients that want your expertise on design and the understanding of construction.
Yes.
But they want to give it a run on hiring their own subs.
Right.
So I can come in and help them from the beginning of, structural design, value engineering, because if you just go out and hire any engineer, it's very easy for them to know to put, well, if I put a steel beam across this ridge or this opening, I know it's going to pass with flying colors at inspection. But you're also putting that burden on the client of buying a $10,000 steel beam when perhaps they could have put a different type of beam, a PSL beam, a Paralam beam. Then it's now only a couple of grand per beam. So it's really important for people to, value engineer everything from the very beginning, because you don't want to get into a huge remodel from the engineer and the architect and the designer, right? And now you have this $400,000 remodel when if you value engineer everything from the beginning, you could be at 320,000.
Right. So you put a big emphasis on planning.
Yeah, planning is the biggest part of a project.
Wow.
If you don't plan ahead of time on your project, if you don't...
How many clients would you say don't come with that mindset initially?
90%.
90%. It's sad.
90%.
Including myself.
They only have a vision and they get really excited about the vision and they just want to go. Which is just great, if that's their approach to things.
So you would put planning on the top.
On the top.
As the first priority.
I think planning is 60% of the project. Planning is 60% of the project, knowing everything that you want from the beginning. And there's changes, but there's also an allowance, right? If you set an allowance aside for your countertops, you can change the color of the countertops, but you know that you can't exceed that number.
Yes.
If you exceed that number, then now you know right there and then,
right,
Guess what? Now I'm spending more.
Yes.
And now was the countertops, and now it's the handles, and now it's so on and so forth. Then you know that you're going over budget from the very time that you make the decision
Of
to go
course.
past that number, right? So it's easier to do all that planning up front and know, spend the time, go to the stores, feel, touch, look at all those items that you want to use in your house and understand what you're getting. Because once you have all that in list and you have a list of it, you have an order of it, easier to have a schedule of it.
Right.
And also, I can meet with the client, and there's a client that's like, I need to have this done in 6 weeks. Well, it's going to take us 8 weeks to plan it, right? Because if you want me to get this done in 6 weeks and be able to produce that high quality finish that I like to produce, I want to have everything here.
Right.
I don't want a hiccup. I don't want something to be stuck in transfer, stuck in here, over there, it broke,
Yes.
whatever the case may be, right?
For our last book, can you give us that example you gave me with that client you had where she asked you, why don't you bring all your materials here so you're ready to go on the day? What did you, I remember that you gave me that example
I can't recall it.
recently, happened recently, where she asked you, why don't you bring all the materials here and then they can just work. But you said, I don't want to make a mess of your yard.
Well, that's the I was going to go with that's the thing of the project. When you come to a client and they have an idea of what they want in time wise, right? It's like you have to start looking around. Can I have staged materials here? Can I put something on their turf or something on their driveway? How is this client? Is this client a very needy client? Because we have those clients, right? So then you have to start to plan on how you do that, because, like I mentioned about the materials, you got to have a working area. You can't just be scattered all over the place, right? And you got to have a staging area. And sometimes for me, the staging area is more important than the working area, because I can do things off-site and bring them in, just all depending on the project. Most fabrication, when it comes to custom fabrication of, cabinets and countertops, I want to have that off-site. I don't want to have it on-site because it's a messy process. Yes, you do have to do some modifications from time to time on site, but it's not the full-blown fabrication of countertops, which, as we all know, it's dusty, it's messy, it's all over the place, right?
Right.
So being aware of where materials are.
So let's conclude this first half. What we would say is that at the top, the lesson that everybody should take from this is, with any project, is planning is first. Put all of it on paper. Make sure you know T's on the dots and everything, and planning. But planning is the number one, and it's very important because people just skip that step. A lot of people skip that step.
Yeah.
Why do you think they skip that step?
Because they don't know how to do it. I think it's such a big part of the business, and a lot of people just don't know how to do it. And it doesn't allow you, doesn't keep you from being able to produce a good project, but I think it ultimately ends up costing you more time.
But it's you can't expect a client to know how to plan it because they don't know materials, they don't know construction.
Yeah, and I don't consider the planning to be coming from the client. I consider the planning to be coming from the person that they're dealing with to do the project, because that's why you're hiring a professional.
Right. And they should present that plan to the client. With, like, written down, they can script to it and see deadlines, they can see all of it, payments,
pictures.
Everything is exactly there.
Even, you run into very common practice in our industry is where, guys come in and they're like, well, I need a, $20,000 or 20% deposit, and you're doing a $200,000 project. So you're cutting a check for $40,000. One, you can't do that.
Right.
State law states 10% max that you can draw on a project like that, and so on and so forth. As you continue with the progress of the project, you got to have very detailed, timelines and very detailed items that need to be done when you draw that money. Because that can get away from them really fast.
Right.
And then now you have a 60% project, but they already drew 80, 90% of the project.
Right.
So how do you account for that? That is the part
Right.
of where the client needs to be very aware prior to starting a project. How are my draws? Where am I getting at what points am I cutting you a check for the progress of this work?
Right.
That is really important. There's so many moving pieces when it comes to a remodel.
There is.
You know, when you're doing it, even nowadays, I mean, right now you go and ask for a simple bathroom remodel, just a very simple one. It's anywhere between $15,000 and $22,000.
Right.
You know, and you're not getting it any lower than that. And if you are, you should be concerned, because is this guy actually going to perform on this? Can he actually make money? That is the question that I always tell a client. You want your contractors or your subcontractors to be making money, right? Because that's what they do it for. They're trying to make a living.
Right.
I'm not saying making them rich on your one project, but has to be a certain amount of profit into every project, not just their wages for them coming in and working themselves, but as a
Right.
business owner, you have to have a profit margin. That's why you're a
Sure.
business owner, right? So that's really important for them to understand that. A lot of them want to get it done for as least expensive as possible, which is understandable. We all want a good deal
Right.
and good product, but there's also that boundary that you got to be very careful
course.
with, right? Because you want, just how you want your GC or your subcontractor to be happy working with you, you want them to be happy working with you as well.
Right.
So it's a balance. It's part of the relationship you have to build with your clients.
Right.
You know, you want to be able to have that word of mouth referral, that confidence that somebody's going to say, you know what, he did a great job. I always, and this is something that I've worked with and have dealt with personally myself, timelines. Timelines are very important to people. Very important. Things happen sometimes and you can't meet your timelines. I much rather somebody say, you know what, he didn't meet his timeline, but he did a phenomenal job. Instead of somebody saying, you know what, he got it done in a really good time, but his work was kind of shoddy.
Right.
Right. I think it's, you know, some people do understand that things happen. If you don't plan right, you could go over those
Yes.
timelines. Planning.
Planning. Yes.
It's the planning.
It's the planning. It's so important to really be thorough and detailed on it.
And the planning part of a subcontractor or a GC is the same thing. When it keep
But people
their
need
guys
to
busy.
understand what the planning means. It sometimes means it's going to the city, understanding what the requirements are.
Yeah.
It's dealing with all of the materials and talking to all the vendors for that. Could it change? If it changes, that's a problem, right? Things like that. There's a lot of little moving parts that people don't consider when it comes to planning. It's not just sitting in a room and I like this and measuring of the rooms. It's actually being out there, dealing with all the materials and the vendors and the city and your own workload and your skilled labor that you have and all of that.
And that's all that's all part of the planning when the client decides to use you for their project. Right?
Yes. So you're saying that if anything, it's probably the biggest part for a general contractor to do.
Yeah.
So if you hire a general contractor, we'd say the first thing you should pay attention to is how good is his planning or her planning?
Yes.
Would you say that that's the most important?
I think that for me, that is the most important.
The most
part of it.
important. Okay.
Because without my proper planning, I can't give you a proper project.
Right. I noticed that it's quite popular now. There's a lot of these companies that are sending their salespeople to your home to change your windows and make it, because they have your number. So, what do you think of those companies, and where's their value in possibly dealing with them, and where is it also kind of like tricky and could be difficult, or what do you think?
When it comes to construction in general, right? I think you have three different, in my view of it, you have three different options. You could be the GC yourself, where you take care of basically everything a general contractor would take care of. Everything from permits, planning, item decisions, materials, so on and so forth. And you also take care of hiring each individual subcontractor for each individual trade, and you manage that.
Right.
Typically, if you're, have some type of knowledge of construction, you can kind of maneuver through that, right? You can kind of figure it out as you go. Then you also have where you can hire the GC, and GC pretty much takes care of all that. So you have one point of contact. You're dealing with the one contractor. Most of the time, they're small to medium sized company, but you still have contact with the company owner. Or you have the big companies, that have the sales guys and the project managers and the superintendents and everything that a big company would have, everything from building. So you're dealing with each individual, a different person for each individual department, right? So you don't really have that one-on-one relationship that perhaps some clients need, and it's all for all their own, right? So
Right.
when you have, for example, you mentioned sales guys, I never treat a project as a sale. I don't like the thought of it. I don't like the approach of it. I don't want to sell anybody on anything. I don't consider myself a sales guy. I consider myself to be more of, this is the information I can share with you, right? When it comes to hiring a sales guy that comes in and says, look, you need this, you need that, I don't like that. I'm not a fan of it. Because I feel like most sales guys, not unless you're one of the fortunate clients that deals with the sales guy that was in the trade and understands the trade, and it's actually selling you on something you need,
Right.
right? And again, that whole sell part for me, I'm not a fan of it. I'm not even a fan of the word using it when you're approaching a project. I don't want to sell you on anything. I want to provide a service for you. You need something done in your home, and I want to be able to provide that service for you. I am not trying to come into your home and sell you on things that you don't need because my company profits higher from it or is what they focus on. You call me
Right.
for flooring, but now I'm trying to sell you on windows, or I'm trying to sell you on the roof, so on and so forth.
Right.
I'm not a fan of it. It's something that I wish there was more control when it comes to the business, and to the industry. But unfortunately, we have a lot of big businesses like that in California, in San Diego, that I've personally witnessed that come in and they're here one day and gone the next.
Right.
Right? They sell windows, and now the windows are leaking 2 years later. You're calling for warranty. No one's picking up the phone. You don't know who this company was.
Right.
All these different things that you run into.